Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be sharing something like this, but here we are. For context, I'm Leo, 25, and let's just say my family dynamics have never been what you'd call balanced. My younger sister, Eva, is the undisputed favorite, the golden child who can do no wrong. Meanwhile, I've been cast as the responsible one, the fixer, the guy expected to pick up the slack whenever things go south. I used to think that was just normal, that all families had a favorite. But what happened last month? That made me realize just how far my parents were willing to go to protect her, even if it meant throwing me under the bus. It all started when Eva, 22, finally graduated from college. And by graduated, I mean barely scraped by after 6 years of coasting, switching majors 3 times, and failing half her courses. Meanwhile, when I graduated with honors, I got a handshake and a good job before they asked me to cover half the mortgage payment because, I had a steady job now. But Eva? Oh, she got the full treatment. A party, gifts, and the ultimate cherry on top, a brand new luxury car. Not just any car, though. A sleek, fully loaded Mercedes-AMG that cost more than I had saved up for my first house deposit. I still remember the day they gave it to her. We were all standing in the driveway, and my dad handed her the keys wrapped in this tiny gift box like it was some sweet little trinket. The moment she saw the car, Eva screamed like she'd just won the lottery, jumped up and down, and nearly tackled my mom in excitement. My dad had this proud smirk, like he was the king of generosity, while my mom snapped picture after picture for social media. Then, as if sensing my silence, my dad turned to me and, without an ounce of self-awareness, said, "Leo, don't look so jealous. Your sister worked hard for this." I almost choked on my own breath. Worked hard? Eva had spent 6 years on what should have been a 4-year degree, partied nonstop, and somehow failed upwards. Meanwhile, I had pulled double shifts at a local diner while juggling coursework, graduated with top marks, and still had to buy my own beat-up sedan secondhand. But sure, Eva deserved a brand new luxury car. From that moment on, that Mercedes became her entire personality. Every conversation, every Instagram post, every TikTok video, it was all about her baby. And of course, since she never had to work for it, she treated it like a disposable toy. Speeding through town like she was in a Fast and Furious sequel, parking like she owned the entire lot, and revving the engine at all hours just because she could. She even started filming those ridiculous videos where people pretend to be asleep while their car's on autopilot, except her version was even dumber. She'd put on sunglasses, blast music, and take her hands off the wheel just to prove how smooth it was. I warned her. I told her she was being reckless, that she was going to end up hurting herself or someone else. But every time, she'd just roll her eyes and say, "Relax, I know what I'm doing." My parents? They were just as bad. Any time I brought it up, they'd wave it off like I was being dramatic. "She's just enjoying her youth," my mom would say, or "Don't be such a buzzkill," my dad would add, as if pointing out dangerous driving made me some kind of party pooper. Then, the inevitable happened. It was a Friday night, and I was at home, winding down from a long work week. Around 2 a.m., I heard the garage door slam shut, followed by hurried whispers outside my room. I didn't think much of it at first. Eva was always coming home at ridiculous hours, but then I heard something that made me sit up straight. My dad's voice, low and urgent, saying, "We have to handle this before anyone finds out." I got out of bed and peeked through the blinds. My dad's car had just pulled into the driveway, and as the headlights flashed across the front yard, I saw Eva slumped against the passenger seat. She was barely able to walk as he helped her inside, her hair a tangled mess, her clothes torn at the sleeve. But the real shocker? When he stepped aside, I saw the Mercedes. Or rather, what was left of it. The entire front end was crumpled like an accordion. The hood was bent at a sickening angle, and one of the headlights was hanging on by a thread. The windshield had massive cracks running through it, and the airbags had deployed, leaving that weird powdery residue all over the inside. I stepped out of my room and made my way downstairs. My mom was pacing in the kitchen, her hands gripping the counter like she was trying to keep from collapsing. When she saw me, she jumped, her eyes darting to the living room where Eva was sprawled out on the couch, holding her head. "What happened?" I asked. My mom hesitated, then forced a smile that was about as convincing as a cardboard cutout. "Oh, sweetheart, it's nothing. Eva had a little accident with the car, but your dad's taking care of it." I stared at her. "A little accident? The car looks like it went 10 rounds with a bulldozer." My mom's smile faltered. "There's no need to overreact, Leo." I turned to Eva, who groaned and rubbed her temple. What the hell did you do? She just muttered something incoherent and waved me off. That's when my dad walked in, his expression tight, like he'd already made up his mind about something. Listen, he said, his tone heavy with unspoken demands. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. About what? He exhaled sharply, like this was all just some big inconvenience to him. About what we're going to do next. I didn't like the way he said that. What do you mean? My mom shot my dad a glance, then looked back at me, her voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. Leo, honey, we need you to say you were the one driving. For a second, I thought I had misheard. What? My dad cleared his throat. We can't let this ruin Eva's future. If they find out she was driving, there could be serious consequences. She might lose her license and she was drunk, wasn't she? I cut in, my heart pounding. Silence. That was all the confirmation I needed. I shook my head, stepping back like their words had physically shoved me. You've got to be kidding me. Leo, think about the family, my mom whispered, like that was supposed to be some kind of magic spell that made everything okay. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. No. Think about Eva. She did this. She gets to deal with the consequences. But as I turned to leave, I heard my dad say something that sent a chill down my spine. If you don't do this, you'll regret it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct in me screamed that this was a bad idea, that I needed to get out of this house before they found a way to force my hand. Because that's what my parents did. They didn't ask. They didn't suggest. They forced, manipulated, twisted the truth until you couldn't even recognize it anymore. And I knew exactly how this was going to play out. In the morning, my dad would sit me down, act like this was some grand negotiation. My mom would cry. She always cried when she wanted me to feel guilty. And Eva? She wouldn't even have to do anything. She'd sit there looking pathetic, letting them do the work for her. And if I still refused, then they'd move on to plan B. Smear my name. Make me look like the selfish, ungrateful son who didn't care about his family. The problem child. They'd make sure everyone, relatives, friends, even neighbors, knew that Leo was the one who let his sister suffer when he could have helped. I knew it, because they had done it before. But this time, I wasn't playing along. Morning came, and right on cue, my dad knocked on my door. He didn't even wait for me to answer before stepping inside, arms crossed over his chest like he was preparing to deliver a lecture. You've had time to think, he said, voice calm, rehearsed. I trust you've made the right decision. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes. Yeah, I have. And my answer's still no. He exhaled sharply through his nose. Leo, don't be ridiculous. This is about family. No, it's about cleaning up Eva's mess. Again. He narrowed his eyes, jaw tightening. Do you think I want to ask this of you? Do you think this is easy for us? Then don't do it. I stared at him. It's that simple. My mom appeared in the doorway then, right on schedule, eyes red-rimmed, a tissue clutched in her hand. Sweetheart, she said softly. We need your help. My stomach twisted. I hated when she did this. Played the role of the broken-hearted mother, the one who just wanted her family to stick together. It used to work on me. Used to make me feel like the villain forever saying no. Not this time. I swung my legs over the bed and stood up. I'm not lying for her. I'm not taking the blame. My dad scoffed. It's a small favor, Leo. Just say you were driving. Say you lost control of the car. Insurance will cover the damage, and we can all move on. I shook my head. Insurance won't cover it if they find out she was drunk. A flicker of something crossed his face, surprise. Like he hadn't expected me to figure that out. We'll handle it, he said quickly. You mean you'll lie? He stiffened, and for the first time, I saw something else in his expression. Not just anger. Not just frustration. Panic. They needed me to do this. They were desperate for me to do this. Leo, my mom pleaded. She's your sister. Yeah? And I'm your son. I looked between them. When's the last time you protected me? Silence. Then, like a switch flipping, my dad's expression hardened. We're asking you to do this. For your family. No. His face darkened. You will do this. I won't. My mom started crying harder. Why are you being so selfish? I laughed, actually laughed. Selfish? I'm not the one who crashed a $60,000 car while drunk and expected someone else to take the blame. My dad's hands clenched into fists at his sides. If you don't do this, Leo, you'll regret it. Yeah? What are you gonna do, Dad? His lips pressed into a thin line. If you don't help your family, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of it. There it was. The final threat. I nodded slowly. Got it. If I don't take the fall, I'm out. If you turn your back on us, he corrected. I'm not turning my back on you. I looked him dead in the eyes. You're turning your back on me. And then I walked out. I didn't have a plan. Didn't know where I was going or how I was going to get out of this mess. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done. Done letting them guilt me. Done cleaning up their disasters. Done being the scapegoat. And as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I heard my mom's voice behind me, trembling with barely contained fury. We'll see what the police have to say about your reckless driving, Leo. I froze. I turned back slowly. What did you just say? My dad stood beside her now, arms crossed again, but this time, there was something new in his expression. Satisfaction. Like he had already won. You really think we don't know how to handle this? My dad smirked. We called the insurance company this morning. Reported the crash. Told them you were driving. My blood turned to ice. You what? He shrugged. The police will be here soon. You can tell them your little version of the story, but let's be honest, who do you think they'll believe? I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. They had already decided, already set everything in motion. And now I had a choice. Play along. Or fight back. I didn't move. I couldn't. My parents had just obliterated whatever delusion I had left that they cared about fairness, about truth. They weren't just trying to manipulate me anymore. They had taken the nuclear option. They had already told the insurance company I was the driver. They had already framed me. And now, they were just waiting for me to give up. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. You told them I was driving? My voice came out too steady, too calm. My dad smirked. That's right. My mom sniffled, playing up the grieving mother act. We told them you lost control of the car. We even mentioned how reckless you can be sometimes, how you've had issues with speeding before. That was a lie. I had never had a ticket in my life. But it didn't matter, did it? They weren't building a case for me. They were building a case against me. And the worst part? They had probably been planning this for hours. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to think logically. I needed to get ahead of this. If the insurance company already thought I was responsible, then... My mom sighed dramatically. It's such a shame, really. You were just getting ready to move out, weren't you? We told the police that too. That you were distracted lately, talking about leaving, that maybe you weren't thinking straight when you got behind the wheel. That's when I realized. They weren't just setting me up to take the blame. They were setting me up to look guilty as hell. I took a slow breath, forcing my hands to unclench. I wasn't driving, I said evenly. My dad chuckled like he was dealing with a child. You don't have proof of that, son. But we have proof that the car was crashed while you were behind the wheel. I stared at him. What proof? We found your jacket in the passenger seat, my mom said, tilting her head like she was so sorry about it. Strange, isn't it? Why would your jacket be in the car unless you were there? My breath hitched. That wasn't possible. My jacket had been. Then I remembered. 2 days ago, Eva had borrowed my hoodie when she ran out for coffee. She'd left it in the car. And now? Now my parents were using it as evidence against me. It was so absurd, so calculated, that I almost laughed. But I didn't. Because this wasn't a joke. I was being framed. And they were damn sure they'd get away with it. A car pulled into the driveway outside. I turned, heart hammering as I glanced through the window. A police cruiser. My dad clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it just hard enough to make a point. I suggest you cooperate, he murmured. For your own sake. I jerked away from his grip. I had a choice. Let them pin this on me. Or fight like hell. I turned, walking toward the front door. My dad's voice followed behind me. Make the right choice, Leo. I pulled open the door, stepping out onto the porch just as the officer climbed out of the patrol car. He was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with the stiff posture of someone who'd seen far too many people try to lie to his face. Leo Carter? He asked. I nodded. We received a report that you were involved in a motor vehicle accident last night. Mind if I ask you some questions? I exhaled, forcing my voice to stay even. Officer, I didn't crash that car. My sister did. And my parents were trying to cover it up. His expression didn't change. Your parents already gave a statement. I'm sure they did. I met his gaze. But I have my own. The officer studied me for a second, then nodded. All right. Let's talk. I glanced over my shoulder. My dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. My mom clutched her hands together like she was holding on to the last threads of her lie. Eva was nowhere to be seen. Typical. I turned back to the officer, took a deep breath, and told him everything. I spoke with the officer for what felt like an eternity, carefully walking him through everything. The favoritism, the cover-ups, the way Eva had been spiraling out of control for years while my parents enabled her every reckless decision. I told him how I'd been asleep in my room when the crash happened, how they had woken me up with their hushed conversations, and how my dad had left in the middle of the night to pick Eva up from the wreck. The officer listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he nodded and glanced down at his notepad. You're saying you weren't in the car at all? Correct. But your parents say otherwise. I exhaled slowly. They're lying. His gaze sharpened slightly. Why would they do that? To protect Eva, I said without hesitation. They've always protected her, no matter how badly she screws up. This is just the next level of that. He was silent for a moment. Your jacket was found in the passenger seat. They planted it, I said. Eva borrowed it 2 days ago and left it in her car. Now they're using it as proof. I saw the faintest flicker of something in his expression, maybe curiosity, maybe skepticism. I couldn't tell. Do you have any proof that you were home during the time of the crash? I swallowed hard. This was it. I was in my room all night, I said. No one can confirm that, but I ordered food around 9:30, and I was playing online with some friends until 11. They can confirm I was active during that time. He wrote something down. Anyone outside your family who might have seen or heard anything? I hesitated. Then I remembered something. Our neighbor across the street has a doorbell camera, I said quickly. It's not pointed at our garage, but it might have caught movement around the time of the crash. His pen stopped. He looked up, nodding slightly. That's good. I'll check with them. I let out a slow breath, feeling something I hadn't felt in the past 24 hours. Hope. Just as I thought things might be turning in my favor, the front door opened behind me. I'd like a word with my son. My dad's voice came, thick with forced authority. The officer didn't move. We're in the middle of an official statement, sir. My dad chuckled, stepping forward with his arms crossed. Come on, now. This is a family matter. No need to drag the police into something we can handle privately. The officer barely glanced at him. The moment you filed a report, it stopped being a family matter. A flicker of irritation passed over my dad's face, but he masked it quickly. Officer, let's be reasonable here. My son's just confused. He turned to me, lowering his voice like we were about to have a reasonable discussion. Leo, he said slowly, you don't want to do this. I met his gaze, feeling something settle inside me. A realization. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. You did this to yourselves, I said quietly. His eyes darkened, but he didn't get a chance to respond. The officer closed his notepad. All right. I'll be following up with the insurance company and checking any available surveillance footage. I'd advise against leaving town, Mr. Carter. I nodded, ignoring my dad's glare. As the officer walked back to his car, I turned to head inside. But my dad's hand clamped down on my arm. What the hell do you think you're doing? He hissed, his voice low and dangerous. I yanked my arm free. Telling the truth. Do you understand what you're about to do to this family? I laughed. Actually laughed. I think the real question is, do you? And with that, I walked inside, leaving him standing there. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Because my parents weren't just going to accept this. They were going to fight back. And I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. I barely had time to shut my bedroom door before I heard them storming inside. My mom was sniffling, already playing the victim, and my dad's footsteps were heavier than usual, his temper barely contained beneath that thin layer of control he liked to pretend he had. They didn't bother knocking. My door flew open, slamming against the wall as my dad stepped inside. My mom lingered behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest. You've gone too far, my dad seethed. His voice was low, controlled, but I could see the barely restrained rage in his clenched fists. You need to fix this. I didn't even bother looking up from my phone. No, you need to fix this. You're the ones who lied. My mom sucked in a sharp breath, like I had just said something scandalous. Leo, this is your family. Funny, I muttered. You only remember that when you need something. My dad's jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're doing. Oh, I understand perfectly. I shot back, finally looking up at him. You tried to frame me for Eva's mess. And now you're pissed because I'm not rolling over like I usually do. Something flickered in his expression, just for a second. Maybe surprise. Maybe even respect? No, that wasn't it. It was more like irritation, like he was realizing for the first time that I wasn't going to bend this time. You're making a mistake, he warned. No, I said, standing up. I'm fixing one. And then, Before I could even process what was happening, my dad's face twisted in pure fury. And he swung. It wasn't a hard hit, not really. More like an open-palmed slap across my jaw, but it was enough to make me stumble back in shock. My mom gasped, but she didn't move to stop him. She just clutched her hands together, whispering, "Oh my God, oh my God," like she had just witnessed something instead of being part of the reason it happened. I touched my jaw, feeling the sting where his hand had connected. And then I laughed. It wasn't funny. It wasn't. But something about it, about the fact that this was their last resort, that my dad, the man who always prided himself on being the logical one, had just hit me because he had no other way to control me. It was just so pathetic. "You really think that's going to change my mind?" I asked, still chuckling. My dad's face turned red, his fists clenched at his sides. And then I saw it. The fear. Not fear of me. No, never that. Fear of what this meant. Of what he had just done. Because for the first time, he wasn't in control. And he knew it. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. "Guess what?" I said. The officer gave me his direct number in case I remembered any more details about Eva's crash. I tilted my head. Think he'd be interested in hearing about this? Silence. My mom's breath hitched. "Leo, please." I stepped back, shaking my head. "I'm done. I am so done." And this time, when I walked out of my room, neither of them tried to stop me. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't need to. I just grabbed my wallet, my keys, and I walked out. I didn't even know where I was going. Just away. I barely made it to the driveway before I heard someone behind me. Eva. She was standing at the front door, arms crossed, looking like she had just woken up. "You happy now?" she muttered. I turned to face her. "Am I happy that you crashed your car, lied about it, and let Mom and Dad try to ruin my life to protect you?" I let out a sharp breath. "Yeah, Eva. I'm thrilled." She rolled her eyes. "It's not like they were going to let anything bad happen to you." I stared at her. She believed that. She genuinely believed that whatever our parents did, whatever lies they told, whatever crime they committed, it would all work out because nothing bad ever happened to her. For the first time, I saw her for what she really was. Not just selfish, not just spoiled, but rotten to the core. "Enjoy your life, Eva," I said. "Because someday, Mom and Dad won't be able to save you." I turned and walked to my car, leaving them all behind. But I knew this wasn't over. Because my parents had just proven that they were willing to do anything to protect her. And something told me they weren't done yet. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, my mind racing through everything that had just happened. The confrontation, the slap, the outright betrayal. None of it surprised me. Not really. What had surprised me was how much I didn't feel anything about it anymore. No anger. No sadness. Just exhaustion. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my parents' respect, their approval, hell, even just basic acknowledgement. But it had never been enough. It was never going to be enough. They had made their choice. And now, I was making mine. I pulled into the parking lot of a nearby grocery store, parked under one of the flickering streetlights, and finally checked my phone. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts. "Mom, come home. Let's talk." "Dad, you need to fix this before it's too late." "Eva, you're so dramatic. Just let it go already." Unknown number. "Leo, this is Officer Grant. Call me when you can." That last one made my stomach drop. I hit call without thinking. He picked up on the second ring. "Leo." "Officer," I said, trying to steady my voice. "You needed me?" There was a pause. Then, "I just got the doorbell footage from your neighbor." I sucked in a breath. And it confirms what you told me." His voice was firm, steady. "At 2 a.m, your father's car pulls into the driveway. He gets out, helps your sister inside. You don't step outside at all." Another pause. "Which means they lied in their report." I let out a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. "They could be charged for filing a false police report," he continued. "And your sister? Well, she was already looking at potential DUI charges if we could prove she was driving. This footage might be enough to push it forward." I closed my eyes. "So what happens now?" "Depends on how far you want to take this," he said. "You can press charges. You can let the department handle it. But either way, this isn't just going away." I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the dark parking lot. Then, without hesitation, I said, "Do what you have to do." I didn't go home that night. I didn't answer any of their texts. I crashed at my coworker Ryan's place. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and told me I could stay as long as I needed. I barely slept, my mind playing through every possible scenario of what was about to happen next. By morning, I had my answer. My dad's voice was the first thing I heard when I checked my voicemail. "You've ruined this family." That was it. No explanation. No pleading. Just a statement. Like he was genuinely baffled that I had been the one to ruin things, not the fact that they had framed their own son to protect the real criminal. My mom's message was longer, filled with shaky breaths and sniffles. "Leo, please, we were just trying to protect your sister. You don't understand. You're throwing your whole family away over this. Please, baby, come home." And Eva? She just texted, "Hope you're happy." It was laughable, really. They weren't apologizing. They weren't admitting they were wrong. They were just angry that their plan hadn't worked, that I had finally fought back, that I was done. The following weeks were chaos. The police launched an official investigation. Eva's blood alcohol test from the hospital the night of the crash was pulled, and sure enough, she had been well over the legal limit. Combined with the footage, it was enough to move forward with DUI charges. My parents tried to fight it, of course. They hired a lawyer, tried to claim miscommunication, tried to guilt-trip me into helping them clean this up. I ignored every call. Then came the real kicker, insurance fraud charges. Apparently, when my dad filed the claim, he had doubled down, insisting that I was the driver and that Eva had not been involved at all. That alone was enough to flag the claim. But once the police got involved, the insurance company took real interest. By the time it was all said and done, my dad was hit with a hefty fine for falsifying the claim. Eva lost her license indefinitely, and my mom, well, she just kept pretending none of it was happening. I thought they'd take their losses and move on. But my parents? They don't lose. At least, not quietly. The first time they showed up at my new apartment, I didn't answer. They pounded on the door, my mom's voice trembling as she called out, "Leo, we just want to talk." I turned up the TV. The second time, they left a note taped to my door. "Family is everything. You're making a huge mistake." The third time, I opened the door. Not because I wanted to hear them out. Because I wanted to watch my dad's face when I told him to his face that he didn't control me anymore. He tried the same old tricks. Tried to intimidate me. Tried to manipulate me. Even tried to bribe me, offering to help with rent if I just let this all go. I stood there, arms crossed, waiting for him to finish. Then I said the words I'd been waiting my whole life to say. "You have no power over me." He stiffened. My mom's eyes welled with tears. "Leo, honey, we just..." I held up a hand. "No. No more lies. No more guilt trips. No more us." Silence. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, my dad said, "If you walk away from this family, don't bother coming back." I nodded. I wasn't planning to, and I shut the door. It's been 6 months now. I moved to a new city, got a promotion at work, started living for the first time, instead of just surviving. I haven't spoken to my parents since that day. Every now and then, I get a message from my mom. Always the same variation of "We miss you. Can we talk?" I don't respond. Because I don't miss them. For the first time in my life, I finally see things clearly. Family isn't about blood. It's about who actually stands by you. And if my parents couldn't be that for me, then they weren't my family anymore. I thought cutting them off would be the hard part. Turns out, the hardest part was realizing how much easier my life became without them in it. No more waking up every day to the weight of being the afterthought, the scapegoat. No more looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next guilt trip or demand would drop. Just silence. Peace. Freedom. At first, I expected the silence to feel wrong. Like I was waiting for something. A reconciliation. A sudden change of heart. Some grand moment where my parents realized they had lost me and tried to make amends. That moment never came. What did come, though, were the consequences. Eva's DUI charge stuck, and because of my parents' interference, they both got slapped with fines for obstruction and filing a false police report. My dad lost his job over it. Turns out, employers don't take kindly to employees being involved in fraud investigations. My mom, who had always clung to her image as a perfect homemaker, found herself facing a community that suddenly knew what kind of person she really was. And me? I thrived. I got a better job, moved into a new apartment, built a life that wasn't tied to fixing other people's mistakes. Then, last week, my phone rang. I knew the number. I almost didn't pick up, but part of me was curious. I answered. It was my dad. His voice was tight, controlled. He was trying to sound casual, like we hadn't spent the past 6 months pretending the other didn't exist. Leo, he said, we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. Do we? He hesitated, then sighed. Your mother and I, we're selling the house. I didn't say anything. He took that as encouragement to continue. Things have been hard since everything happened. The fines, legal fees. It's been a tough time for the family. There it was. The same old angle. Must be, I said evenly. There was a pause. We were hoping you might be willing to help us out. I actually laughed. Help you? We're still your family, Leo. I shook my head. You made it pretty clear I wasn't part of that anymore. He sighed again, but this time, I heard something else. Frustration. Like he had expected me to cave. Like he still thought he could manipulate me. But I wasn't that person anymore. I can't believe you're holding a grudge over this, he muttered. And that was it. That was all I needed to hear. I smiled. Good luck with the house, Dad. Then I hung up and blocked the number. It's funny. For so long, I thought I needed their love, their approval, that if I just worked hard enough, did enough, was enough, they would finally treat me as an equal. But I was wrong. What I really needed was to let go. And for the first time in my life, I have. Eva will always be their priority. That will never change. But the difference is, I don't care anymore. Because I don't need them. I never did. And that's the best feeling in the world.